I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. What a week it's been. Bishop DiMarzio goes into the deep to talk about the death of Osama bin Laden.
He certainly was just a man that was fomenting hatred among peoples, which was terrible. So to have that eliminated was kind of a good thing, I felt.
Plus, a family remembers a loved one lost on 9/11.
If it wasn't for our faith, I don't think we could ever got through this. And our parish and our fellow parishioners.
And the Diocese of Brooklyn celebrates the beatification of John Paul II.
He was a very positive person, one of the greatest Polish people in our history, actually.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. It was a week that began with the wedding of the century. TV and internet viewers shattered records as the world gathered to watch the marriage of a prince and a commoner. Well, who would have known that we would go from discussing the details of Kate Middleton's wedding dress to celebrating the elevation of Pope John Paul II to blessed, bringing him a step closer to sainthood, by the way, to celebrating in some cases the death of Osama bin Laden, the notorious mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. But that was the week that was, and we're going to review the twists and turns that made headlines this week. Earlier, I had the chance to speak with Bishop DiMarzio about the dominant story these past few days, the death of Osama bin Laden. We went into the deep to discuss justice and grief in the aftermath of the death of a man who had the blood of many innocent people on his hands. Bishop DiMarzio, thanks so much for being here.
Good.
Appreciate your time. We were talking a little bit before we started this interview, and we were saying, who knew we were going to be talking about this time around? But of course, the death of Osama bin Laden. I want to first ask you, what was your reaction when you first heard the news?
Well, maybe with some relief, because again, I think this man, unfortunately, was continuing to foment hatred. Even if he wasn't actively involved in plotting things, he may have been. Didn't seem like that way. But he certainly was just a man that was fomenting hatred among peoples, which was terrible. So to have that, eliminated was a kind of a good thing, I felt.
Sure. Now, Martin Luther King Jr., of course, once said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Do you think that that's true in the case of Osama bin Laden?
I think so. I mean, justice eventually is done in all things. It may not be in the time frame that we think. But usually justice is done in the end. Certainly in God's time, justice is done. But certainly we'd like to see it in our own human time. And in this case, as I say, justice, it's a very complicated situation. There wasn't a trial, but I mean, obviously he took credit. I mean, he said he did it, and most probably he did, and I don't think nobody else claimed credit. They would have, if there would have been a fight. Sure. Somebody else would have said, I was capable of this terrible thing, which some people said was a great thing. But again, the moral implications are complex.
Sure, and when you look at that night when the announcement was made that bin Laden died, you had out in front of the White House, you had and down at Ground Zero, in other cities and towns, a lot of college towns across the country, celebrations breaking out. Do you think that we as Christians, as human beings, should be celebrating the death of another human being?
No, I don't think so. I think that's rather than appropriate. You could understand how people were happy that a terrorist threat and a terrorist was eliminated, but it's not quite certainly Christian the way we would think to celebrate that, just as we were so taken aback when we heard of celebrations when the Twin Towers came down. We didn't think that was good, and I don't think on the other side this is good. When you don't celebrate basically something wrong, something evil, although the event that would eliminate him from terrorism was good. The fact that we don't celebrate a person's death in that way.
Sure. You talked about the celebrations when the Twin Towers fell and all of that. Take us back a little bit to that day. What was maybe some of your memories from that horrible
Well, I
day?
happened to be in Washington that day at a bishop's meeting, and as you know, the Pentagon also was attacked, so it was a very tense time. The planes were overhead. Then I finally got back to Jersey that day. The meeting was canceled, obviously, and I was a bishop of Camden at that time, and surprising to me, there were people who worked in the World Trade Center and who lived in the diocese, commuted every day, which was hard to believe. It's quite a long commute. But we did have funerals, and we did have people who were affected in one way or another. So it was a very traumatic thing for everyone, the whole country, certainly anybody here that was on the Eastern Coast, seaboard, was felt deeply by everyone.
Sure. And with those people who were in your diocese at the time, and also even here in Brooklyn, which was also, of course, greatly affected. Obviously, you ministered to those people and those families. What were their reactions? What were their lives like at the time, and how have they changed since?
Well, it was a tremendous, traumatic experience for the country, certainly for the individuals. And time does heal, but very slowly in this case. I think the people who were directly affected, long time to really heal. To never will they forget. But the healing process is a rather difficult one. Sure. So they still need support. I mean, it's clear that nobody's is over this.
Sure. And do you think that Osama bin Laden's death might bring some sort of closure or process toward that?
I don't know. I wasn't directly affected in that way, so it's hard to say. Sure. I think the world feels safer that the mastermind of terrorism is not there anymore. So that could be some kind of a relief. As far as changing the atmosphere, I don't know if that will. It depends on the reaction, especially of people who feel they're oppressed. And again, these things come from a perception of oppression, that people feel oppressed, and they want justice the way they see it. So there's a conflict of values and of understanding.
A very, very complicated issue. Well, Bishop DiMarzio, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Well, earlier this week, we also visited St. Peter's Church in Lower Manhattan, just a stone's throw away from Ground Zero, to learn how people, particularly people of faith, were feeling in the aftermath of the news of bin Laden's death. And our first question for those folks there was whether or not people should be celebrating his death.
Christian people are supposed to not, want somebody dead.
I'm a Christian. I'm celebrating right now.
I don't celebrate anybody's death.
Anything injustice, Jesus will celebrate.
I think it's horrible to see people celebrating someone's death.
I hope he rots in hell. Seriously, my friend?
It's about vengeance. I mean, sorry.
I'm glad he's dead.
He was created by God, too. He's a human being.
I'm definitely coming to thank God.
I don't judge him. I leave that up to God.
My enthusiasm is tempered, there's part of me that says, yeah, we should celebrate. We're allowed.
This is not a time for celebration. This is a time for remembering lost ones. I lost 12 people I worked with at Ground Zero, Building 1 on 9/11, and that's why I just came back just to remember.
Welcome back. The death of Osama bin Laden overshadowed the other big international news from last weekend. Pope Benedict XVI moved his predecessor, John Paul II, one step closer to sainthood on Sunday. The widely popular late pontiff is now known as Blessed John Paul, allowing him to be publicly venerated. Italian authorities estimate that a crowd of over 1 million pilgrims crammed into shoulder to shoulder into St. Peter's Square to take part in this historic beatification mass. But the Vatican was not the only place where you could find people celebrating this historic moment. Brooklyn is home to a sizable Polish community, and the Catholic community here also celebrated John Paul II, a favorite son of Poland, in a bilingual Polish-English Mass at St. Francis de Chantal Church in Borough Park. Parishioners gathered as one to celebrate the soon-to-be saint.
My sisters and brothers, we gather here this afternoon with great joy. We join our hearts and our minds with the millions of our sisters and brothers who gathered with Pope Benedict to celebrate this wonderful occasion of the beatification of Pope John Paul II. We also join our minds and our hearts with our sisters and brothers in Poland, for this is a great day of rejoicing. Beatification is the official recognition on the part of the Church that a person who has gone before us in faith is truly a person of holiness, who can be venerated, who can be really admired, and whose example can be followed.
A gorgeous day, beautiful Mass, and many people come here. We are happy because Jean Paul was our father.
I was the teenager when he was on his pontificate, so he was very actually powerful. That was very powerful person who speaks and who know how to get to the young people, and because of him, you know, many people probably get back to the church, get back to their faith. He was a very positive person, one of the greatest Polish people in our history, actually.
To be able to empathize with people who are suffering, who lived in injustice, and to be able to be an effective advocate for them, marked his papacy.
He would like every people to be brothers and sisters. For him, every people was in the same level. Nobody was higher, nobody lower.
He was like a man who brings the love. That's the most important. It's a great honor for Poland. We're very proud of him.
They came from all over. Brooklyn came here to pray because they needed some pray in his Polish language, Polish spirit.
Anyone who's of Polish descent, today is a day of tremendous spiritual pride and joy.
I try to actually follow him, you know, in many things. I try to be very tolerant to everything because he was the person who joined different religions. So I try to follow him, you know, I try to just be close to him.
A faithful son of Poland lived through all of the oppression and persecution that the Poles lived through under Nazism, under communism. They remained faithful, he remained faithful with such courage, such dignity, such effectiveness, and now to be numbered among the blessed.
Facultatem facimus, ut venerabilis servus Dei, Johannes Paulus secundus Papa, beati nomine postrum appellitur, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
A big day for the Catholic Church and a big day for the country of Poland as well. But now let's turn to St. Peter's Church in Lower Manhattan, not far from Ground Zero, to ask people if the U.S. is now safer now that bin Laden is dead.
No, we're not.
I don't think so.
Because there's so many other ones coming out of the woodwork.
There are other people that follow the same ideas.
I don't think so.
No, not at all.
It's just like a tree. There's lots of branches.
I feel that there might be some retaliation.
At this time, probably more unsafe.
There'll always be terrorists, but I think it'll be much safer now.
I don't think so.
Not at all. I don't think we're safer. I think it's a morale booster.
We're safer in one respect because we showed that we retaliate against somebody attacking us, but at the same time there's a chance they can retaliate against us again.
He was just irrelevant at this point. It's just more of a psychological blow, a psychological victory.
Welcome back. Well, invited guests came from around the world to attend a special event hosted by the Vatican over the weekend. Well, no, we're not talking about the beatification of John Paul II, which happened on Sunday, but this was another gathering that took place just one day later. On Monday, which incidentally was also the day the world woke up to the news U.S. forces had killed Osama bin Laden, the Vatican hosted another historic first. See, the Holy See's Council for Social Communications held the Vatican's very first conference of Catholic bloggers to recognize the unique role they play in our vast media landscape. Rocco Palmo, the author of the blog Whispers in the Loggia and a regular contributor to Currents, was there He was a conference moderator, and I had the chance to speak with him by phone earlier this week to gauge just how successful the Vatican was in its call to go forth and blog. Let's talk about this bloggers conference first. Tell me a little bit about your experience and who else was there and what you talked about.
Well, there were 150, as you said, from from every language group. There were 6. It was kind of like the UN. We all had headphones on with simultaneous translation. But while there were 150 of us who were there were 850 applications that were received, which completely caught the officials who were planning this off guard. I mean, they only had the idea around 2 or 3 weeks in advance. And so they were thinking, well, we may get 50, 100, just throw open the doors, anyone who wants to come. And then, here they are with 850 requests. So it was very interesting because, obviously a lot of us who write pages know each other, but we've never met each other. We've never had the ability to come together. And it was really the Vatican and, the Pope doing his job. Peter's mandate from the Lord was to confirm your brothers in their faith and keep them together, bring them together. And that's, the officials who have been planning it privately and publicly have always been very keen to say, this is just a first step. This is not, and it's not any attempt to clamp down the blogosphere because they know that will blow up in their faces. So it was, it was just a wonderful kind of getting to know you both amongst ourselves who write, but also to get to know the Holy See. And it was a beautiful and very humbling testimony of the role of the blogosphere in the life of the church today.
Yeah, and these are a lot of people. I know yourself included. You're no exception to this. You all have a lot of connections with a lot of people in the church, outside the church. Was there a lot of networking and things like that going on while you were there?
Well, there was. It was panels. The event was 4 hours top to bottom. There was about a half an hour break worked in midway. People that just kind of grab a drink and start talking to each other. But a group of French bloggers on their own initiative put together an after party at a bar right outside the colonnade of the Vatican. And literally there had to be around 60 of us who went over. And we were all speaking different languages to each other. Some of us had a hard time understanding each other. But, the conference ended at around 7:30. But the after party, if you will, went to around 1:30 in the morning. So it was a long night.
Wow. Well, of course, this happened just the day after the beatification of Pope John Paul II. Tell me a little bit more about your experience with that. And I know you were saying that you went, I believe, just yesterday, and there were still, to St. Peter's Square, and there's still tens of thousands of people there.
Well, there was a Thanksgiving Mass outside yesterday morning, and because of the demand to see the coffin of John Paul, it was kept in the open in the Basilica through the day yesterday. I went down because the lines, even as dusk fell on Rome on Sunday, the lines were still 5 or 6 hours to get into the Basilica. There were still tens of thousands of people outside. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go as late as I can. So I ended up going down at 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday night into Monday. And there were still probably around 8,000 to 10,000 people down there. It took the better part of an hour still to get in. But it was so moving to get in there because you still had the place full, but very reverent. But above all, the guards, and the people who make the Basilica run were very generous as to give anyone who wanted as much time as possible to pray near the body. And people were literally, holding on to the barricades as people passed by just so they could have that moment. And I was lucky to be in there around 10 feet away from the body for close to an hour. A lot of my readers sent me different intentions to pray for and everything. And so that it was incredibly moving. So and that happened again yesterday after the Mass. But then last night, the body of John Paul, which had been in the Vatican grottos beneath the Basilica since 2005, was put in its new tomb on the main floor of St. Peter's in one of the side chapels. They actually had to move out a dead pope from the 1500s to give John Paul some space up there. And so now he's got his own side chapel, and it's under an altar. So that's probably going to become, the new hot spot, if you will, in St. Peter's to say Mass on every morning. The first Mass actually above the body was said this morning by John Paul's secretary of 40 years, Cardinal Stanislav Dziwisz of Krakow, the main advocate for his beatification and canonization.
All right. Well, and very quickly, Rock, did the subject of Osama bin Laden come up at all while you were there? Of course, it's happening right the day after that news broke as well.
Well, it did, because one of the participants in the conference was the Vatican spokesman, Father Federico Lombardi, it was amazing that he was still able to come to the conference because he had been spending the morning fielding requests from the world's media about a Vatican reaction to the death of bin Laden. And basically, in a nutshell, what Lombardi's statement was on behalf of the Pope, on behalf of the Vatican, was that Christians never rejoice in the death of anyone. However, at the same time, Osama bin Laden, having been responsible for grievous crimes against humanity, to which he had admitted, now stands before the judgment of God.
Wow. All right. Well, what a weekend, Rocco. Thanks so much for joining us to tell us all about your experience there in Rome. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your stay.
Anytime, Matt. See you when I get home.
All right. Thanks. All right. Well, there is much more currents coming up. But first, let's take a last look back at reaction from Lower Manhattan the day after the announcement of Osama bin Laden's death. We asked people if bin Laden's death would provide closure for those who lost loved ones.
Bin Laden's death does not bring those people back.
There's never a closure, especially in the sense that they died for no reason, no apparent reason.
They cannot bring their loved ones back, so it helps a little, but I don't think it will close.
Whatever it takes for the people to get closure, if this is what it takes, then good, I'm glad.
It never brings anybody back, but it does give them peace of mind.
I think it will for a lot of them, and I think some of them just never going to have that.
There's never a closure. You just learn to live with it. You never forget, but you do move on. And I have moved on along with thousands and thousands of other folks that experienced what I had experienced.
I really hope that the families now find peace and can get on with their lives. And hopefully this drastic event won't ever happen again.
Well, finally tonight, yesterday, when President Barack Obama was here in New York City, he paid a visit to a fire station, Engine 54, that lost 15 men on the day of the 9/11 attacks. The visit came almost a week after the president ordered the raid by U.S. Special Forces that would kill Osama bin Laden. In all, New York lost over 300 firefighters on that horrible day. And tonight, we bring you the story of one of those brave first responders who left their fear behind and rushed bravely into the crumbling, burning towers. Kenneth Phelan. Kenny, to those who knew him and loved him, well, he was a fireman. He was a son, a father, and a brother. And to those of us who didn't know him, but knew him only as a person who gave his life to protect us on 9/11, well, he'll always be a hero. Tonight, his parents, Danny and Helene, remember their son.
They had a roll call to see who was there and who wasn't, because they really didn't know at first who was killed or whatever. Kenny nor the firemen that with him ever made that roll call. He was baptized in Our Lady of Hope Church, and he was the first child ever baptized in that parish. He attended grade school there, was an altar boy. He came on to the New York City Fire Department, and he was working on 9/11 in downtown Brooklyn. I was very lucky and blessed because the morning he went to work that day, he had to borrow a car from us. So that morning I was home all alone. We sat in the car and spoke a few minutes. And as I said to always would say to him, to be careful at work. And he said, fine. And I, at that time, was painting the inside of this house. And typical Kenny, he said, listen, on my way home tonight, I'm going to stop and help you paint. And I never would dream that when we parted in 2 hours, he would be murdered. Kenny was married and he had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. The youngest was a boy, and he's named Kenneth. And lo and behold, he was born on Kenny's birthday years before, because he was just going to enter 1st grade in school at that time.
This picture was taken on my son Kenny and grandson Kenny's birthday, their mutual birthday, June 27th, 2001, his last birthday. It's in front of our house.
Nothing was found Our families that were killed there are all over probably downtown Manhattan, into sewers, into the river. And they weren't wrapped in a white cloth and put into the ocean. I was happy to hear what happened and that they killed him. I mean, he had one shot in the head. The people that died, they had a horrible death. They were in a building with floors and floors and all the everything in them coming down on them. That did not happen to him. He was shot and he was dead. For the people that were in the streets celebrating, you know, I felt a little strange about that. I wish it could have been a little more low-key, but you know, he was not to be walking on the face of this earth. He was nothing but evil. If it wasn't for our faith, I don't think we could have ever got through this. And our parish and our fellow parishioners were just fantastic for us. They were there all the time to help us.
Yeah, that was a good picture to show him. That's him out there in the water.
It's a tough loss, and we miss him so much. If God would have came down years ago and called to us and said to us, I will give you a boy, but you will only have him for 41 years. We would have gladly taken him, because even what happened, they never can take away from us the 41 years of joy he brought to our family.
Heartbreaking story. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents and our Week in Review. Please share your comments and your views with us on this ongoing story. All you have to do, drop us an email, and you can do that at dropusaline@currentsny.net. Now, on another note, I'll be taking a well-earned vacation next week, I must say. Our own Natalia Ortiz will be filling in for me while I'm away. I will miss you, but I'll be back, okay? So have fun with Natalia next week. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night and a great weekend.